Okay, we're going to start off talking about collecting Spanish handguns in general, Spanish-made handguns. It does kind of fall under military surplus because some of these guns were made and issued to the Spanish military and foreign military, but a vast majority, especially the early ones, were issued to the police, the border patrol, and all that were issued these handguns for many years. Spain has a long history of making guns. Spanish gun makers were also famous for making copies of all sorts of firearms from the late 1880s, all the way up into the 50s. Revolvers, and I have some revolvers that are neither a military or law enforcement example, but an example of some of the work they did and what was available on the U.S. market, because prior to 1968, no matter what firearm was made in Spain, a lot of the projected sales were in the United States, because they made a whole array of 22 pistols, little pocket 25s and that, 380s. The Astra made the Constable, which was a kind of a PPK clone or something very similar in size, and they were priced pretty reasonable, and they were inexpensive, in competition with, like, say, a Colt or a Smith & Wesson or a Ruger pistol. The Spanish guns were usually available at a pretty reasonable price. Your old-fashioned budget guns, put it to you that way. All right, so we're going to go over a few things. I'll show you a couple examples of what I got. And one of the most important things when doing work collecting is you have to have a good resource material. Okay, and I'll go over resource material. I'll show you some guns in the collection, and we'll go on from there. And then what I intend to do is take each individual model and do a little video on it and the features, maybe do a field strip video, and so on and so forth, something like that, to make content. Because like I said, now the surplus market, and even these guns are undervalued, and you could pick them up fairly reasonably. Nobody really wanted them until people realized that they were a fairly functional, well-designed gun made out of metal. And now even the prices on these things are considerably higher than they used to be. All right, and what I was talking about reference material. I have here two books. That one, I got the sun shining in there. You got Star Firearms in one book. I believe I got this thing on sale, and it was $150. And then you got Astra Firearms, which this book also covers most of the other manufacturers. Okay, Star was a very popular gun maker, and they had most of the serial numbers for all of the models, but there was some documentation in that lost towards the end when the factory went bankrupt. And the guy even had pictures where he showed you a room full of papers on the floors and everything. The Astra is a lot better. And also, the Astra covers some firearms that are not standard, like you see the copy of the broom handle they made, and the Campo Gria gun, and the serial numbers are included in this book. This book was a bit more expensive. It was upwards towards about $180. And some guys go, oh wow, that book costs $150 and $180. So, I got more than $300 wrapped up in reference and studying. And if you actually read the book, you learn a lot and become well versed and can approach collecting these guns informed, educated, and knowing what you're doing. So, you can look into it. If you really are into it, I highly recommend picking up these two books if you like collecting Spanish pistols. Okay, looking at some guns that we have here. We'll start with, because this is mostly a mil surplus, the Astra 400 or the model 1921. This particular gun here, the larger version, is what the Spanish military adopted as its standard pistol. There was an older one, the Campo Gria. I do have an example, also in a 9mm Largo, but that's in storage. I have to get that out. And I recently picked up, like you guys seen if you've been paying attention to the channel, the model 300 in 380 Auto, which you can see the size variation here. These guns were not highly collectible, and usually you could find them even when the supplies ran out over the years. I believe a lot of these showed up when the guy from Inner Arms went in 1966 or something and bought everything from the Spanish government they had in reserves. A lot of these handguns came in at that point in time. Even though that pistol became the Spanish military issue pistol, Star kind of is famous for making, it's kind of a modified version of the 1911 or Browning style pistols. This here is a model 1920, and this is what they presented the Spanish Army with to adopt as their military sidearm. It was not accepted in the subsequent models that were 20, 21, 23. They had different variations. The National Police or police force adopted the gun or bought them, and they would sell on the open market to different governments and countries the pistols also. But Star, over time, you know, now we got, the only B I have is this BM. Okay, and that's basically a clone or somewhat modified version of the 1911, and that's the last batch they brought in, these BMs. They were a law enforcement issue, kind of a short-barreled version in 9mm Luger. Okay, eventually Spain dropped the 9mm Largo and went to the 9mm Luger, and a lot of them will come in a box, even some of the older ones. Star would take the used guns, they would be traded in by a law enforcement department, they'd refurbish them, repackage them, I guess, and then sell them on the surplus market as a used firearm. So that's a practice that Spain did, and you will find some of these with a box. These came with the box, and the price on these has gone up a few $100s a piece on them. They were pretty common and all over the place. And then as Star changed over the years, they developed the Super. And here we have what you'd call a Super A. And this was where they redesigned it with a SIG style takedown, and it kind of departed. It still resembles a 911, looks like it, but they re-engineered it. And actually these Supers are nice pistols. I have the little Super S I bought. It's in 380, and plus I have an older S also. But this is still in the 9mm Largo. This was used by the military, and you can find some models that will have Air Force emblems or military emblems on the slide itself. Okay, but they realized, I guess the Spanish Army used them up until the 50s in the 9mm Largo, but they realized that the 9mm Luger was the way to go, and to make a more marketable pistol, one that they could export and sell, they came up with what is the Super B model, which is the same as this except in 9mm Luger. Okay, and there were some recent imports of this one. And I remember I got this one from a local gun shop, and I thought I paid pretty good price for like $100 over. Now they're difficult to find, they're in demand, and the price has also gone up on these. But I really like this gun. Well, I like both of them, either one. It's just a 9mm Largo I have to hand load. And also I have several other different variations that are not a military surplus. Not a Spanish law enforcement surplus, but this here, like this Jolo AR with the little lever. This company was a Spanish company. They patented this little lever for one-handed cocking. And these particular guns, they were made in several different commercial variations in 380, 32. This one's in a Largo. And the only law enforcement unit that purchased these from the company was the Chilean Mounted Police. And they bought a bunch of these, I think in the 20s or 30s or something. And then somebody went down there, found these, they were in storage, and bought all of them, and they were imported to Florida long before 1968, and you had to have the import mark. So there's no import marks on this. But that's where these, if you find an example like this, that's where they came from. And you know, I have several other little smaller handguns that are basically copies of a Smith & Wesson or something, revolver from made in the 20s and that. And a lot of the knockoff guns, they can have they range anywhere from pretty bad quality to actually fairly decent quality, you know. That's the strange thing about these off-brands. Like the Ruby pistols, they made a ton of them for France from 7 different manufacturers, the little 32 autos they used in World War I. I haven't gotten one of them yet because when I started getting interesting, they're overpriced for what they are and usually the condition that they're in. But who knows? Alright, that's a general view, and what I intend to do is go through my odd collection of both military, police, and some civilian clones and copies of Spanish firearms, and for content on my channel. Alright guys, so hit the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned.